Good afternoon. Hi, my name is Jibril Cabiles, and I'm from the Holistic Education and Development Center, otherwise known as HEDCEN in Taytay, Rizal. And I am here on behalf of my teammates to present our theses. So since my teammates are not here, I'll go ahead and grab the spotlight and share my story. So 3 years before I had started studying birds, I had absolutely zero interest in birds whatsoever. So when Sir H decided to invite me to study birds with him, I was skeptical because every day the only bird I would see, and I was convinced that was the only bird that existed, is the Eurasian tree sparrow or the Maya bird. It's very common in Manila. So every day that's the only bird that I saw. But when I started studying birds, I was very surprised and I did not know how wrong I was before. So today I will show you how diverse Beverly Hills is and Maharlika Hills. For those of you who don't know, Beverly Hills is the subdivision where our school is located. So our objectives and the significance of our study is as follows. The hypothesis that we established is that habitat diversity dictates bird diversity. So naturally, humans need to build and live in homes. It is a basic need for us to have a shelter. Unfortunately, in the process of building residential areas, we also destroy the homes of birds. So this is Beverly Hills and Maharlika Hills. And as you can see, there is a strip of vegetation here and going up towards the north. And also you will notice that there is residential development happening here on the left and also here. So in time, there's a possibility that that strip of vegetation will disappear because the residential development will expand and our efforts in conserving this place will be wasted. So this is what our study is about. How can we build residential areas and at the same time at least alleviate the threat this has on bird diversity? So we also decided to include UP Diliman as a study site since it is surrounded completely and enclosed by residential development. So we are interested to see the results between the two areas. This is Beverly Hills, and this has experienced a lot of land use changes. First it was a mango plantation, and then it became a cattle farm, and then finally a residential area. So you can imagine how many habitat types are present in this place. And our other study site is the subdivision beside Beverly Hills, which is Maharlika Hills. It only experienced one change, which is from woodland, complete woodland, to residential area. So you might be wondering, why did we choose Beverly Hills and Maharlika Hills? First of all, it is easily accessible for us since our school is just right here and we can easily walk around the area. And also, since the history of both areas are different, it would make a nice comparison. Moving on to methodology. So the first thing we did was to conduct a bird survey. We discovered the paper online, which was written by Sir Villejo, who I know is attending the symposium. I'm sorry, I don't know what you look like, so I'm sorry for the mistakes I might commit. So we implemented the method with a few modifications. I read that they entered woodland areas, which we did not. We just stuck to the road since the woodland isn't extensive enough. And what we did was we walked along the perimeter of the 3 largest loops of the 2 study areas. And this is the bird field guide we used in conducting the survey. We also used binoculars. And while we walked along the transect, we used a bird recorder to record the bird calls to add to the species list and confirm identification. These are the loops that I was talking about. We walked along this. And then for Beverly Hills, it was divided into 3 transects. By the way, the survey that was conducted in Beverly Hills is separate. It was conducted by a group of third-year students from HEDSEN, and they called this Transect A, Transect B, and Transect C. Okay, I'm sorry. Technical difficulties, but please bear with me. This is the abundance list of the 3 areas. And the species richness for UP Diliman is 28, this one, of Maharlika 38, and for Beverly Hills 42. And we computed the percentage of the residency of the birds, and as you can see, Beverly Hills and Maharlika Hills look very similar. And this is UP Diliman. I apologize for the confusion. You can just ask me to clarify it for you in the open forum. We also created a bird species sample curve of Beverly Hills and Maharlika Hills. And as you can see, the line for Beverly Hills is asymptotic, while the line of Maharlika Hills, which is the blue line, is steeper. So this means that the discovery of new species is still possible. Okay, from methodology, we also computed the dominance and diversity indices. So we used Microsoft Excel for this. We computed manually. We didn't use any program. And we concluded from these results that Maharlika Hills is the most diverse out of the 3 sites. 3 out of 4 of the indices were consistent. So, moving on to terrain analysis. Why do we do terrain analysis? We did this, we had our own system so that we could quantify the habitat diversity of the areas. So, this is the legend. And then what we did is that we put the maps against a grid using Photoshop, like so. And then we color-coded them according to the habitat of the box. Since we were short on resources, we did this instead. And then we divided the number of boxes to the total and came up with this pie chart. As you can see, the residential area is the dominant habitat type in Beverly Hills, followed by woodland and then scrubland. And then here, the dominant one, we considered grassland and residential as a combined habitat preference. So if you actually add the percentage of grassland and residential, it will be equal to this almost. And then we can conclude with this that habitat diversity indeed dictates bird diversity for Beverly Hills, since it mirrors each other. For Maharlika Hills, on the other hand, we did the same thing. We did the grid system, and then we made a pie chart of the habitat diversity of Maharlika Hills. And as you can see, the percentage of woodland of Maharlika Hills is a lot larger than that of Beverly Hills. So there is 43% of woodland followed by 34% of residential. For the habitat preferences of the birds in Maharlika Hills, still the woodland is most preferred by the birds. And then, like I mentioned before, grassland and residential, we considered them as a combined habitat preference, since the residential areas are mostly surrounded by grassland. And yes, here also, habitat diversity dictates bird diversity in Maharlika Hills as well. In the study conducted in UP Diliman by Sir Vallejo, they sampled 4 subplots in UP, and we did the same thing. We did the grid system and came up with these results. So as you can see, the largest percentage of habitat is residential, followed by scrubland. But we were a bit confused by this piece of data, because if there is only 2% of wetland, how come there is a very large percentage of birds that preferred wetland? So we thought that this seemed a bit, this was not conclusive. So since that was not consistent data, we decided to confirm it by using the MVSP program, or the multivariate statistical package, and we did a cluster analysis. So this came up. As you can see, UP Diliman is very much different from Maharlika and Beverly. And it was mirrored also in the dendrogram of bird species abundance data, UP Diliman being much different from Maharlika Hills. So here, we can conclude that habitat diversity dictates bird diversity. Moving on to conclusions, we decided that it would be good residential developmental guidelines to implement more, to plant more woodland in the area, because more woodland would be efficient and it would be effective in conserving the bird diversity there. And also, woodland is better than scrubland or grassland. We concluded, finally, that habitat diversity dictates bird diversity. We recommend, our recommendations, I'm sorry, this can be a bit misleading, but I'll explain. For overcrowding, this study opened a lot of questions for us. How can the trees be arranged in a residential area? Should they be clustered or should they be scattered and the houses spaced? It also opened the question, which was what type of water source should be in a residential area? Should it be a stream or a concentrated water source like a lake, or both? And also, there was also a question like, what is the impact of roads and traffic? These can be effective barriers of the colonization of bird populations in adjacent habitats. So, many questions talaga. And then we also, our last recommendation is to maintain the corridor here so that the movement of wildlife is maintained. Thank you. I am now open for questions.
So I know that the researcher is ready to answer the question. We'll only invite 2 questions. Okay, we have kindly use the microphone. You're acknowledged.
I am Miss Ethel M. Gayuna, a secondary school teacher in Bukidnon National High School. I understand that your study is about birds, so I would like to see the birds that you have studied, the pictures, the pictorials of the birds that you have surveyed or studied there in the area. Plus, I would like to see the listing that you have in each study area, since you have 3 areas, Maharlika, Beverly, and the UP Diliman. Thank you.
Okay. Unfortunately, I included only 1 picture in my presentation since I had to prioritize the data than the pictures. So this is 1 picture. My teacher and I are very proud of this. This is the red-crested malcoha in Maharlika Hills. We were surprised to find this kind of bird, which proves that the ecological value of Maharlika Hills is indeed quite high. So that's the picture of the malcoha. And as for the abundance list, Here I'm sorry for the confusion earlier. Okay. Here. I did my best to fit everything in because it's a very lengthy list, but here it is anyway. That's from A to G, and then G to Z. Would you like me to go back to the previous one?
We still invite one more question. Anyone? Before we close the second presentation. Yes, we have one there at the back.
Alan Roman once again. Considering what you have shown to us about the map, the aerial view of the location, is it possible that the birds in Maharlika and the birds in Beverly or in Diliman are the same birds? I would like to rephrase my question. Is it possible that these birds can transfer from one place to another?
Yes, it is very possible since Beverly Hills and Maharlika Hills are adjacent. But we really wanted to cover the area around the river since as the previous speaker mentioned earlier, we're conserving a river there, so we're studying the species in the environment there. So what we really wanted to do was to investigate the area surrounding it. Yes, the birds might be transferring there, but what we really wanted to do was to familiarize ourselves with Maharlika Hills and Beverly Hills.
Because when we presume that these birds are transferring from one place to another, so comparison could not be. Cannot be surmised or cannot be a good ground for conclusions.
Okay. I do acknowledge that this may have a lot of errors, but I'm a young scientist.
Excuse me.
Can I make a very small remark? I think you did a very well study, very well.
So it's already time. Okay, so this time let's around.